So you were not an attentive student, is that right?
Pardon?
You were not attentive
sorry.
in school.
That was my little joke, Malak.
Tim, it takes luck. It takes one person to see what's there.
If a door cracks open and you think it's the one you want to go through, push politely.
Absolutely.
I wish I was D.H. Lawrence, but I'm not. It's a formula. This is great. I haven't thought about this stuff for decades.
That's the point of the show. You have to go back.
Thank you. You'll need to lie down afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. This episode is brought to you by EFG Hermes One, your one app for investing in more than 35 stock markets worldwide. Hi, everyone. I'm Malak Fuad, the host of What I Did Next, coming to you from A&T Media. This month, I've had the pleasure of bringing to you Tim Marshall, who is a best-selling author of books on geography and how they intersect with geopolitics and with current affairs, and why it's an area that is so underrated. We are all so concerned for what's happening around us, and we're all looking for answers to really fundamental questions. Who we are, why is this happening to us? Why does it keep happening to us? And what is it about our region that attracts all these problems and this chaos? Tim's books really help us put this in perspective, understanding key questions from the point of view of geography and how each country inherently has advantages and disadvantages, both in terms of history and geography. So I want to just pull up here 2 of your books, which I adored. So,
thank you.
Right here. You gave us a talk in London in October for Intelligence Squared, and I just absolutely loved it. And I found it, first of all, it was a packed hall, which is kudos. You obviously have, you're a magnet. And I found it really interesting that your audience was made up of every demographic. You had every age group, but you had a lot of students, which I thought was fascinating, and I thought that was brilliant. We worry that the new generation is complacent or not interested, and you proved it wrong. I mean, you had, and the majority of the questions that you took that night were from students, and they came up with really interesting questions. So I felt quite hopeful leaving your talk,
Good. And I mean, they have proved that they are not, many of them are not that. I think younger people were the ones that probably drove the rise of podcasts.
Yes.
And also proving they're not 3-minute attention span people necessarily. People said that long format was dead, and podcasts have proved it wrong. As for the demographic, I think, to praise myself, if you forgive me, I do try and make things
Please
accessible.
do. How refreshing.
I do try and make things accessible, and therefore it's accessible to everyone. But also the subject matter, of course. It doesn't matter if you're 18 or 80. It affects us, and it's of interest.
Absolutely. One thing I noticed, which I do now that I've got this sort of podcast profile, I guess, which is you and I met before your talk, and we had a coffee, and we chatted like 2 normal human beings.
I think.
And I paid for your coffee. Yes, I bought you a coffee. Yeah. So the funny thing about that is, so we had this really nice chat, and we, kind of broke the ice a little bit. And then when I went into the hall, and then you came onto the stage, you had a stage persona. So you changed.
I did?
Yes. So a switch went off, and you became Tim Marshall, author, best-selling author, presentation to get through, et cetera, et cetera. And I found it really, I started laughing, actually. I thought it was really cute.
Well, that is the real me as well. I behave differently when I go and see my football team, Leeds United, than I do when I go and see my mum, because she would be astonished at the Tim that goes to see Leeds United.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, it's an act in a sense, but I think a lot of us are acting nearly all the time.
Generally.
And I don't
you
mean
step
that
out the front
negatively.
door and you put on a different kind of persona, right?
But the other thing that you just made me think of is it's also because I spent so long in television news, and I used to say to some younger reporters, be aware you're acting. I mean, you don't have to ham it up.
Yeah.
But be aware, this is not normal. You don't go downstairs every morning and say, this morning I'm going to have cornflakes. You don't. But when you're on the telly, you have to project. So I think there's probably a bit of that as well.
Yeah, I found it funny, and entertaining. I mean, you were extremely entertaining on that
There were some
stage.
terribly bad jokes, but that's deliberate as well.
But everyone laughed, so
I do like a
we
bad
all went
joke.
along with it. Yeah.
Shakespeare went into a bar, right, into a pub, and the landlord said, "I've told you, you're barred," which is an English language thing because he was known as the bard. That sort of joke. Honestly,
but
I think
it gets the room going, really.
People realise then they're not necessarily going to be bored to tears with
A
arcane,
geography lecture,
complicated geopolitics.
Yeah. So I want to go back, Tim, before we get into your new career and your new stardom. You left school at 16. What did you leave school with your GCSEs only?
Leave.
Oh, you were invited to leave.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you were not an attentive student, is that right?
Pardon?
You were not attentive in school.
That was my little joke, Malak. Did you say something? I'm
going to have to get on the Tim Marshall wavelength to get through the interview.
No, I wasn't. I was thoroughly bored. Didn't know what was going on most of the time. I got into a lot of trouble in and out of school. They stuck me in what was called the remedial class. This was for people with mostly learning difficulties. And I had learning difficulties, not because I wasn't capable, just because I wasn't trying.
Do you think that today you would have been diagnosed with ADHD, one of those attentive disorders?
I think it's not impossible. I think there's far too much diagnosis of that.
Yeah.
It's possible. But I think it's more that I'm not blaming the teachers in the school. I mean, it was a bog standard state school, comprehensive school, 35 to a class, lots of disruption, of which I then was drawn into and participated in.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I had gone to a different type of school with better discipline, I might have been disciplined.
But you would go home and read avidly, right?
Yeah.
So you were not encouraged at school, but you still went home and you realized that you still had a thirst for knowledge, basically, and you were almost self-taught in a way.
Voracious reader. And also, I mean, it's funny, I was this dichotomy, if you like, in that I went to the football, I got into bits and bobs of trouble, same at school, big into fashion and music. I wasn't a nerd in that sense, but I was a nerd simultaneously in that, at 12 years old, I'd be watching documentaries about international affairs. I remember even at 9 years old being fascinated by Martin Luther King's funeral and realizing this is some sort of a momentous event. This is a 9-year-old kid in Leeds in Yorkshire, but I could just, what is this? And then the books. So I was this sort of caught between two worlds, but there was only ever one world in which anything was possible, and it certainly wasn't the world of academia and journalism and news.
And what was that world? What were the expectations for you at the time?
Zero. I'm not trying to paint a hard luck story. It's just, my brother went on to be a refrigeration engineer and then a minicab driver. Now he's a chauffeur. Half the lads went into the wood factory, which was opposite the school. Some went on to the sixth form. It wasn't a disaster as a school.
Yeah.
But no, I became a painter and decorator. Yeah. That was my first job on leaving school.
And how did you make your way from that? And you were also a petrol pump. Pentrol attendant.
Yeah, I did a bit of that.
You had a brief spell in the RAF.
4 years.
4 years. How did you make your way to broadcast journalism? I mean, that's a stretch. Where did that
Yeah.
come
Well, there's a
from?
bit of blagging. Sorry, for non-native English. Blagging
but
is,
blagging is the way into a lot of these jobs, right? Yeah.
chancing, a bit of a
Yeah.
chancer. I think the Air Force played quite a role in that gave me discipline. That gave me structure.
Why did you join the Air Force, Tim? What was it about that attracted you?
Not very much. I was unemployed.
I see. Okay.
Well, all right. That's a little bit disingenuous. I went down the Navy and I said, what jobs can I do? And was it my eyesight? There was some problem, and they said you could be a warehouse man on shore. Oh, what's the point of joining the Navy?
Yeah.
Be a warehouseman.
Sure.
So I went to the Army, and they were very keen to tell me that I'd very soon be in Belfast, in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. And
not very appealing.
Well, I mean, later on, I wouldn't say I was attracted to war, but, I did cover a lot of wars and combat, and there is something compelling and horrible about it. And then I went down the Air Force, and they said to me, you can be a telegraphist. Well, what's that? And radio operator, and I'd seen enough World War II films, with Morse code and
yeah.
Thought,
cracking the Enigma code.
Good. So I went into the Air Force, did 4 years. So that gave me this sort of structure and discipline that you actually have to do stuff and teamwork. Unfortunately, after about 2 years, I really figured I want out of this, but I signed up for 9 years fixed, couldn't get out.
Wow.
Yeah, well, when you're 18, I joined at 17, and when you're on your 18th birthday, you have to decide 3, 6, or 9. And so I thought, well, hang on a minute, you said that, and now it's this. So I tried to get out, and they wouldn't let me. So I embarked on a 2-year career of growing my hair as long as I could get away with, not shining my shoes.
Career of mischief to get out.
Basically, I was back at school again.
Yeah, exactly. You regressed.
And they eventually said, oh, go on, get out. I think the end point came when the warrant officer came in on the night shift, and I was standing on a table declaiming from Karl Marx or for Communist Men, just for a laugh. I wasn't a communist, but it didn't go down very well in the Cold War.
You were an agitator, yeah.
Well, I mean, I wasn't. I was just having a laugh. But
you're having fun.
I think that was the tipping point. So anyway, this is great. I hadn't thought about this stuff for decades.
That's the point of the show. You have to go back.
Thank you. You don't need to lie down afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
On the way out of the Air Force, you had to do this career review or whatever. And there was this WAF, a female officer. And she said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go to university. Because I had spent that 4 years reading. And also, don't forget that new wave and punk music was happening at the time.
So we're talking the early 70s by then?
Yeah, late 70s. Yeah. And they were referencing
70s.
a lot of politics. If you listen to a British band called The Clash,
they
were referencing the Sandinista revolution in Nicaragua, or if the Jam were referencing George Orwell, etc., etc. And, if a teacher references that, I'd have fallen asleep, but, these cool guys. And so that got me into exploring. And I thought, quite fancy going to uni, but I didn't have any qualifications. You need A-levels, and I didn't even have O-levels, the one below.
Mm-hmm.
But I took a night school course. So she just wouldn't give me any help at all. She said, no, you can do this, you can do that, refrigeration, paint and decorating, radio operator in civilian life. I said, I don't want that, I want this. And she said, well, no.
It's not your path.
I did a night school course, got an A, and on the basis of one O-level at A, they let me in to college on a mature student. And in those days, you didn't have to pay, which was great. And then I was down in London. Again, I was unemployed, and I was doing another night school course in something, which again was free in those days. And doing the same course was the news desk secretary at LBC IRN. Told her of my ambitions. I didn't know what a curriculum vitae was, because I didn't speak Latin. Didn't know what a CV was, but she said, get yourself a CV. And there was a department that required, for 3 days' work, they required a sort of T-boy researcher. News Information, it was called. And bless her, this woman called Vivian Fowle, wonderful woman. After journalism, she went into charity work. And only because that nice woman gave her the CV, she said, oh, well, take a look at him. And she clearly, bless her, saw something. And the 3 days turned into 30 years.
Yeah. Tim, it takes luck. It takes one person to see what's there. And you make the most of that first entry, don't you? That's what it did. That's what it is.
If a door cracks open and you think it's the one you want to go through, push politely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know you from your years at Sky, foreign correspondent, then you became diplomatic editor, but you were there for all in all about 30 years, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am actually 87. Yeah.
You obviously started young. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's the thing. I started late. I didn't get a full-time job. I didn't get a full-time staff job until I was in my early 30s, but I didn't get into journalism until my mid-20s, which is quite late. Then a documentary series when the BBC were looking for an unknown to do some undercover work on a 5-part series about racism. So I left the freelance job to freelance with them for a year. Quite successful. A bit of sort of, oh, you've done something now. And then I this is going back to being a chancer or a blagger, if you like. I still had contact with LBC Radio, and they didn't have a Paris correspondent. I remember the editor saying to me, we get these people, they go across, they disappear down the metro, we never hear from them again. I said, I won't do that.
I'm going to count on me.
I'll be your Paris correspondent. I'm not going to disappear down the metro. And they looked at it and they said, we haven't got anyone there. I mean, freelance, not staff. And they said, do you speak French? And I said, do you think I'd be so stupid as to go to France and be a correspondent if I don't speak French? Which is a question, not a lie.
And rhetorical, I presume.
Yeah, because once I'd got past bonjour, I was struggling.
Yeah.
But packed everything up in an old car, went across, got a flat, bought a very old-fashioned one of these, learned how to unscrew a phone and stick some crocodile clips on it to have a better quality. Made it up as I went along. And I didn't disappear down the metro, except in the mornings. And I used to come back, because this is pre-internet, pre-mobiles. And they'd say, oh, I've been ringing you. Where have you been? Oh, I had a meeting with, President Mitterrand or whatever. Whereas, in fact, I'd been at my intensive French language course every morning.
I was going to say you were at the cafe having a croissant and a coffee.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Pretending to read Le Monde.
Yeah, exactly.
And off the back of that, Sky asked me in their first year, which was 89, Sky News, to file occasionally from Paris. And then in 1990, they said, can you come back and be a reporter for us? And I said yes, which was difficult because the last story I covered in France was the Cambodian peace talks. Mm-hmm. And to go from that to then being the most junior of the junior reporters, covering, as we say in English, cats up trees. Dogs up trees would be news. Cats up trees.
Cats up trees is pretty common.
Yeah.
But why did you do that then, Tim? What was what was your rationale? What did you see in Sky that you wanted to be part of, maybe?
I could see that it was something new. It wasn't establishment. I mean, they'd have buried me at the BBC if I'd ever gone there properly. They'd have buried me. The Australians were front and centre in setting it up and running it. And they have pluses and minuses. But one of the pluses is that can-do attitude that, well, give it a try, let's do it. Whereas the BBC at the time, I don't know now, was let's have a meeting about this, and then we'll put it on the agenda to make it the third item on the agenda next week.
You had that newcomer versus
Yeah.
establishment philosophy, didn't you?
Yeah.
And it probably suited your abilities and your character and all of that.
I'm afraid so. And again, I didn't really, I didn't know that. I'm not sure how much I know about myself, especially at that time. I'm
Yeah.
not particularly reflective. I think it's instinctive. I think I instinctively knew I could do something here.
Most of our decisions, I think, are instinctive, and we don't stop and think in a 360 way when we're making those
Yeah.
decisions. At least
Some
I
people
was
do,
like
Malik.
you. I didn't do that. I would just jump into things and say, yeah, that sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I'm
then
not
it's only later that you start thinking, oh, actually, that was a really good decision. And
Or
it led
bad.
me to, or bad, and it led me to meeting so-and-so. That led me to the next job and
Yes.
so on.
Sliding doors. But
Yes.
I take your word, you're like that, and I suspect I'm like that. But there are quite a lot of people that really do think it through, chess, if you like. This will lead to that, this will lead to that. I mean, it was either Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, or it was Michael Heseltine, one of the two, I forget, when they were at Oxford or Cambridge, probably Oxford.
They were both at Oxford,
genuinely
I think. Yeah.
wrote down on the back of an envelope, I'm going to do this, 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 this. And at the top of the list is Prime Minister.
Right.
There are people like that.
Yeah. Well, it's both of them. It sounds in character for each of them. So it could have been either one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
And also, let's say you're in the military and you're in the army, and to rise through to Major General, whatever, you have to have some combat experience. Doesn't have to be that much.
Yeah.
You then can go into like management. You can go into logistics. There's all these steps you have to take. Whereas, I just
but
one thing after another.
No, I agree with you. But I think your age group, my age group, even we had more of a path to success that was clearly defined if we chose to do it, or things were very clearly demarcated in certain careers. Today, I think, I look at my children. I've got two children, 20 and 18. Their world is, there's no blueprint for anything anymore. Yeah. It's just, you almost make it up as you go along.
You're right, because I used to say to younger people, and I don't as much anymore, be very careful when you make your decision, because you're going down this road and there's not going to be very many branches off if you find you don't like this road. Whereas now I think there's still some truth in that. But I do think it's easier to, make a U-turn or just come across. And media is a good example, with its multimedia. Whereas before, you print, radio, or TV.
I also think that there's no road now. There's just no road.
And fewer jobs for life.
Exactly.
More, portfolio careers, etc. Yeah, it's... I mean, it's liberating in one sense, but it's also unsettling and unsafe. Jobs are far less safe.
It's just another way of being, and it hasn't yet shown its true colors yet. I mean, it's still very much in the infancy of all this AI stuff and how do you juggle jobs.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot that's unclear in my head. This episode is brought to you by EFG Hermes One, your one app for investment across more than 35 stock markets worldwide. With EFG Hermes One, you can buy and sell orders in real time for immediate execution across multiple global markets. You can keep track of your favorite stocks by creating and customizing multiple watch lists, and make informed investment decisions with their advanced technical analysis tools to study market trends and investor behavior. So supercharge your financial journey and download the EFG Hermes One app on the Apple App Store and on Google Play and start investing today. Let's go back to Sky, Tim. So 30 years, that's a lifetime. You covered every hotspot, every war, every peace treaty. You've been to every part of the globe. Why did you stay through? I mean, what kept you doing this for 30 years? It's a tough job that you were doing,
Yeah.
What was it? Obviously, as you said earlier, there's a bit of adrenaline there with conflicts.
Yes. There's a whole bunch of stuff, I suspect. ambition, probably, to do stuff.
Yeah.
I never had an
To make your
ambition to.
mark? To make your
Pardon?
mark?
I got probably, yeah. Yeah,
But that's a good
probably.
thing. You
I
say
mean,
it
yeah,
like
I get, yeah,
you're embarrassed about it. It's a good
ego isn't
thing.
necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
Too much ego is. So, yeah, okay, there's that. Testing yourself, which is, mostly a male thing, but not entirely. Um, sheer interest. Oh my God, to go to these places and that you'd read about. I mean, I've been to many, but there are some like Tashkent. I've never been to Tashkent. That was always sort of. I've never been to Timbuktu. These great romantic names.
They're
But on the other
romantic
hand,
sounding names, aren't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
I've been to the Euphrates Valley and I've been to Al-Quds, Jerusalem, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and Damascus. Wow. Anyway, um,
Damascus is amazing. Yeah.
amazing. So there's that. There's the money, which wasn't bad. Um,
Always something that's going to keep everyone. Yeah, of course. It's important.
and also I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenges. I enjoyed writing. Writing for television, when it's done well, is really, really good. Uh, Forgive me, there's not that many people can do it, especially now.
Give me an
Uh,
example. What does writing for television mean in the sense of a news bulletin, for example?
do not say what is in the pictures. What's the point?
It
What's
seems
the
really
point? I can see
obvious,
the
doesn't it?
picture.
So you're describing the experiences of being where you are, what's happening around the scenes.
No, I'm talking about writing with, or as we say, to picture. So the worst ones will, as Prime Minister Starmer arrives in a black car outside Downing Street, they will say, the Prime Minister arrived in Downing Street. What's the point of saying that? The Prime Minister arrived in Downing. That's 7 words, and you've only got maybe 280 if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Why would you spend 7 words doing that? Um, let's say someone opens the door for him. You can say the Prime Minister's looking for a way out. If the story is he's in a real problem.
Yeah.
So
He's in a
that's
rut.
writing
Yeah.
with picture.
Yeah.
And hardly anyone does it anymore. Forgive me for praising myself. I was in Kosovo, in
You're
Pristina.
allowed to do that on this show, by the way.
I was in Pristina when the Russians arrived. And that moment when they rolled down Pristina's high street was when the tide began to come back in or out.
Yeah.
And I knew that because the Russians had made sure they got there before NATO. Now, it didn't work out for them, but that's not the point. The point is, my opening line was, forgive me, the Russians rolled down Main Street and back onto the world stage. Because I knew that was the moment.
That was the hook.
Yeah. Now that's writing with to picture. So anyway, yeah, we did all that. Really enjoy, and that was possibly I enjoyed the most was using image and words and putting them together. Really enjoyed it.
You had a point where you were in Egypt covering the Arab Spring. You had a good friend and cameraman who was shot at the time, and it kind of made you take a step back and reassess a lot that was going on, and whether you really wanted to be doing this for the first, to continue with.
Yeah, Mickey was shot in Cairo. Mickey Dean. I'd been with him in exactly the same spot 2 weeks earlier. I mean, I think this was probably already percolating because I'd had a couple of narrow escapes down the years, but it was after. I mean, I did the fall of Mubarak, and this was after the fall of Mubarak. This happened,
right?
And then from there, I went on to, and I'd already done Afghanistan and Iraq, but from there I went to Syria and had 2 or 3 narrowish escapes. And I think if it hadn't been for Mickey, I might have kept chancing it.
Going.
But it really had a profound effect on me.
Yeah.
In fact, I've known about 12 colleagues that have been killed. And Mickey was a friend, and 2 or 3 others I was friendly with. But also, I know Mickey's widow and the effect it had on her and his children. And, I was aware that I have my own responsibilities.
Yeah. And you probably felt you had the 9 lives, you don't want to push it.
Yeah. And I think you
Yeah.
have to listen.
I wanted to change tacks a little bit, Tim, and then we're going to end with a really light, fun lightning round. Just about your writing process. How do you research your books? How do you write? Do you have a system? Are you the type that writes from 5 a.m. until 12?
God,
how do
no.
you do this? Because you switched careers, in effect, didn't you? You've changed careers.
Yeah. I tell you what I found hard to get used to, given that it's 20 to the hour, we're finishing this piece, editing it. It's 1/4 to the hour. Oh my God. It's 10 minutes to the hour. Wow, we make it with a minute to go. Get it on air. It's lead story. To, what do you mean you're publishing it next year? That was very hard.
Yeah.
So I wish I was D.H. Lawrence or Hemingway, but I'm not. It's a formula. So the formula is, once you've got your title, that's a big start. And then, most important than anything, structure.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things I want to write about. Let's say there's 15 of them. What order do I want to write them? What order would they make sense? Now I've got my chapters. Bang, 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 bang. Great. Once I've got title and structure, it's not the hardest thing, because the hardest thing is a year of bloody doing that.
Typing away, yeah.
But without that, I think you're all over the place. And everything can be finessed and moved around, but once you've got your structure. And then, let's say you're going to write 80,000 words. All of them, most of them, your own. And this isn't plagiarism. You then begin to research. And let's say you download 15 papers from RUSI, the military think tank here, Chatham House, diplomatic think tank, Council of Foreign Relations, the Egyptians' report on the Sinai, whatever it is. And then newspaper articles, and then history, and then you do your interviews, and I transcribe them. I have now got 1 million words. I need 80,000. So
that's the hardest part, actually, isn't it?
Yes.
Narrowing it down.
Then I start going through them. That's actually quite easy. I've got the delete button going, delete. No. Oh, hang on, this bit's important. So now I've got 400,000 words. Where do they go? Right, this whole block goes in that. So now I've got 10 folders open.
And are you doing this bit all alone, or are you working with an editor at this stage?
In the first instance, completely on my own.
You're on your own.
I've never, ever used researchers. I mean, when I was at Sky, sometimes when I was presenting, one of the jobs, and it's a good job, and I understand it for researchers, is they present you with an A4 on subject X. It's not that I didn't trust them, it's just that I always wanted to go through the same research and pick out what I think this is the important bit. So I always used to do my own. If I'm researching and I find a moment, that's going in.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it could be little things, forgive me, but it's obvious really, but I hadn't thought about it. When I was doing my book about space, The Future of Geography, and when I read that the astronauts had left all their human waste behind in little plastic bags on the moon, that's going in.
That's brilliant, of course.
Because that's
the sort of nugget the reader's going to remember.
Yeah. So moments, they go in. And then you better start writing your first word. Once I've done a chapter, it gets sent off to my brilliant editor at Elliott and Thompson Books, Jenny, who takes out the worst of my jokes. And I do put jokes in serious books.
I like your jokes. I think they're sweet.
They usually also say something about...
Yeah.
But what she's brilliant at is saying, those 2 paragraphs there on page 7 fit much better on page 13. I can't do that. I cannot see it.
No.
She sees it.
But that's normal because you're in the weeds. She's got the bird's eye view.
Yeah.
That's very normal.
And there's a little bit of back and forth, but I would say 10 times out of 10, she gets her, no, 9 times out of 10, she gets her way because 9 times out of 10, she's right.
And what's next for you, Tim? What are you looking at next? What's the next project?
I couldn't possibly comment.
When are we going to have a follow-up then? Is it in a year so that we can
I've
talk
been
about it?
looking, I've spent a whole year now since I finished the 10th anniversary edition
The
of
reissue. Yeah.
Prisoners of Geography,
Yeah.
which took me more than a year to write because it's a completely bang up to date for the last decade. I spent a whole year actually every day thinking, I want to write this. And then in the afternoon thinking, I don't want to write another book. And the next day in the morning think, I don't want to write another. And in the afternoon, I need to write this.
It's niggling at
And
you. There's something niggling at you.
I'm still there, but
it's coming.
I'm moving towards pretty soon, I think, sitting down and assembling 1 million words.
Yeah, another million. Yeah. But that's how it is, isn't it? You have an idea, you put it on the shelf, you take it back down, you try it out.
But why am I doing it?
I don't know. Why are you doing it?
I'm not wealthy. I've not got a yacht, but I don't really need the money. I've got an awful lot to occupy me. I go to every single Leeds United game. That's 40 games a season all over the country.
Yeah. But when you're a curious person, Tim, you're curious and intelligent. It doesn't just switch off because you think you should retire.
I've got a Substack I'm building. I do some media work. I do some talks in the City of London. So why put myself through it?
You like to write. A Substack isn't the same.
Well, I dislike writing, but when I write a sentence and I think, oh, that was good, which isn't very often, it's kind of, I think, oh, that was good.
Yeah.
When I write,
it's tickling something in you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah.
The Russians roll down Main Street and back onto the world stage. I want to write.
You're chasing more of those sentences, aren't you, Tim?
Well, I came up with one for the Sunday Times. I did a big page article for them a couple of weeks ago, and it was about the raid in Venezuela. And I deliberately got into the beginning of it, gunboat diplomacy, how we used to act in the 19th, 18th century. And I ended it with Delta Force diplomacy.
Nice.
Which I'm very proud of.
Well, you should be. And it's almost as if you structured the whole article just for that beginning and end, right?
Well, once I thought of Delta Force diplomacy, it was only then I went back and inserted gunboat diplomacy to make it sort of explicable. Now, I copyright that. Okay, anyone listening, don't you be using it.
We'll use it at the top of this interview. We're going to end, Tim, with a very quick lightning round. I don't want you to overthink it. I just want you to say what comes to mind immediately. What is your most used emoji?
I don't use emojis.
At all?
If I had to, the smiley one to say, I'm only joking.
If you had 25 hours in a day, how would you spend the extra hour?
Sleeping. Actually, that's not true. Nah, sleeping.
Is there a country that you haven't visited you're dying to visit?
Yeah. It's a very long story. I won't tell it. I was on my way. A colleague kiboshed it. North Korea.
That is interesting. Okay. If you were to choose another profession, what would you choose?
I am so lucky. I got to do what I wanted to do when I was a kid, but never thought I would. I think I could have made a reasonable teacher, but it never appealed.
I see that.
On the radar. This might reveal a lot about me. I quite fancied being an actor, but maybe I was.
Do you know what could tick each of those boxes is if you do a YouTube channel and explain in a fun way your books?
I have actually thought of that. It's just too much work.
What's your favorite activity?
I was going to say watching football, but it's quite painful at times. Cooking.
Yeah? Would you like to cook?
I'm not particularly good, but I do a very good British Sunday roast chicken.
Sunday roast.
I'm working on my roast potatoes.
Good. It's hard, actually.
Alchemy for those. Yeah, cooking. No, I mean, I only have one hobby really, and it is football.
Football.
I like I say, I go home and away. I watch 3 or 4 games a week.
Yeah.
I used to play quite badly. So football is an abiding passion through my life.
What's your least favorite activity?
Oh, God. Sorry, I know you said don't overthink it. I don't mind driving. I don't mind DIY, although I'm rubbish at it.
Admin, taxes.
Yeah, I'm not very good at admin.
Pretty
I'm
soul-crushing,
not
isn't it?
very organized.
Okay.
I
Okay.
do not enjoy it and put it off.
Last two. I'm going to read the beginning of a sentence and you just end it. I have a hard time.
Understanding. There is an instinctive understanding that can come easily, but you better be right. And to be confident, that's hard.
When you think about that, what do you mean by understanding? Like understanding what?
Human nature? Geopolitics? Is there a God? To which the last one I think is probably, almost certainly, just don't know what she looks like. See what I did there?
I did see that one. I like that.
There's one ray of light comes through a stained glass window, right? There's 7 colours on the other side. I don't care what colour you like. It's fine. I like this colour, you like that colour. It's good.
Nice. Last one. I get joy from.
Leeds United winning goals. You won't believe it, what we do when that winning goal goes in.
When that happens.
Hug strange men you've never met. It's weird.